So do you want to have our participants, say a little bit about themselves before we get started? So it's a little
Yeah, I
more
don't.
interactive.
I think it's too many. Uh, if we can, if we have time at the end, um, and then we can have more time for questions. Um, all right. Can everyone see this?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Good.
All right. So we did our introductions here. So let's go ahead and get started. So this event is titled "Demystifying the Black MD DO PhD" with a subtitle of "Success and Perseverance." It's a co-event that is um, co-hosted by APSA and AABPS, which again, it's the American Physician Scientists Association and the American Association of Black Physician Scientists. And today we're just going to go over some bits about MD and DO PhD training and what maybe they what particulars may be encountered, especially as a Black or African American student. Let's get into it. So, and if you guys will take questions at the end, just so format wise, but we also have some questions that we noted from everyone that registered. But if you have any that you come up with, definitely save them for us at the end. We're going to try to make this pretty short in the sense of presenting so that we can get to more, hopefully, questions that you all might have. So here, a physician scientist, just as a definition, it's a person who is a physician and who also is someone who does basic and or translational research. Typically, especially today, they have an MD or DO, or have the dual MD or DO PhD. One of the ones at OSU here that we have is Dr. Sylvester Black. We also have Carrie Ann Mitchell. These are at OSU physician scientists. And these are videos you guys can see on our website on ABAPS. The MSTP is one kind of avenue that you can go down. It stands for the Medical Scientist Training Program. It's an NIH T32 grant supported program that's very competitive, probably the most competitive, but there are also MD, non-MSTP, MD, PhD programs out there as well. One of the biggest kind of perks that the MSTP can provide its trainees is the stipend, as well as some other funding support. But a lot of MD PhDs are catching up in that regard and providing these stipends as well. So I would never suggest counting either one out. So a lot of these programs, you can do your PhD in a variety of disciplines listed here. I'll let Jose take this part.
It's hard to hear, Jose.
Yep, sorry, there you go. I muted myself. There are a lot of different MD, PhD programs. I'm not sure how many there are, but in terms of DO PhD programs, there are currently 8 programs. So I just put the sort of logos of those different institutions there so you can see them. So MSU, the Ohio Heritage University, Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, Des Moines, Rowan, Osteopathic, the New York Institute of Technology, the college in Texas, University of Northern Texas Health Sciences, and then Oklahoma College of Osteopathic Medicine. Depending on which institution you might look at, some of these programs are a lot smaller. For example, NYT, they only offer a very specific PhD program. Whereas if you maybe attend a larger university like MSU, Ohio, or Oklahoma, they'll be more traditional in terms of the breadth of science that you can participate in terms of your PhD. So I know at our program, we have folks doing genetics, I'm doing microbiology, epidemiology, the social sciences, engineering, whereas again, at Rowan and NYT, you're looking at like a PhD in a very like biomedical sciences or pharmacology, depending on those programs. And then just in terms of some basics between DOs and MDs, for those who don't know, there are 2 fully licensed physicians in the United States. You can be a DO or an MD and do anything in medicine, from surgery to primary care to being a physician scientist. And I'll just say that there are definitely a lot of pros and cons to being a DO at a different institution. And so really thinking about that. And in terms of physician scientists, as I said, if you're going to a smaller institution, finding mentors in a specific area might be a challenge. And then also, there are no DO PhD programs yet with that MSTP T32 grant, although I know our institution is very close to having one. So yeah, I'm happy to take any questions about that route. Just thinking that maybe not the traditional path for becoming a physician scientist, but definitely an option for everybody to apply. And our program in particular is really looking to recruit folks. So.
Thanks, Jose. So going forward here, I would imagine that, and Jose can speak to this on the DO PhD side, but the MD PhD program is definitely diversifying over the last 15 years, I would say even 20 years as well. This is, of course, a good thing for you all that are trying to get in. Some little bit of kind of a side, accessory track here is, before you think about, getting into one of these MD or DO PhD programs, a lot of people, I know myself included, was considering a post-bac, which these are opportunities after you've graduated, if you've already graduated from your bachelor program, to develop, enrich your skills, both academically and then scientifically, meaning you would work in a lab and develop these skills. The programs that exist throughout the nation. I know at OSU, we used to have one that was specifically, it was called the Success Program, that was specifically for MD, PhD prospective students. However, we have a prep program now it's broadened in its trying to attract also MD only students, but they're still interested in getting these physician scientists interested students as well. But it also exists getting a master's, and then there are also intramural NIH fellowships as well. And most of these programs, just to note, are interested in increasing the diversity and representation in these particularly these physician scientist programs. A little bit about the MD PhD application, which is, I believe it's coming up soon for when it's due. Of course, you're going to go at least the MD route, MD PhD route through the AMCAS, which is through the AAMC. You have essays, a personal statement, MD PhD statement, and research experience statement. The reason the MD PhD and research experience statement are bolded here is because they are the most important when you're applying to these physician scientist programs. I will say that the MD only students or prospective students also have a personal statement, but they don't have the other two. And so the MD PhD programs are really, really, really looking at these two bottom statements here, just to get a kind of a picture, a sense of your commitment to MD PhD, and then also through not just your words, but also your experience that you can show on paper. So be wary of noting that those are incredibly important. And lastly, there are secondary applications that are school dependent. They vary from, like a public health type question, social questions as well, and are more, again, tailored and specific to certain topics. At OSU, we have a different admissions process. I think every program is going to have its own method to how they interview people for these spots, but we have a committee. We read the essays, personal statements. We are looking at the GPA and MCAT score as averages, not so much as single separate scores. And then the interviews, at least more recently, have been around 2 to 3 days, and the school will pay for your flight and hotel. And you may have, I'm pretty sure the younger trainees on this meeting can speak to it more than I can, but I believe the medical school interviews as well as the MSTP program. Strong interviewing tips that you should have is definitely, like your essays, making a strong case for why you want the MD and the PhD, and just in general, DO and PhD, doesn't matter. If you're interested in it, you should be able to talk about it for, I think, for a long time. And it should be quite clear from how you're talking to your interviewer, and they should be able to pick up on it just like that. And then you should be able to clearly communicate your research experience. Of course, you're probably more knowledgeable about it than your interviewer is, unless you happen to get someone in your field. But nonetheless, you should be able to talk to them about your research and what the significance of it is, and any results that you've had. Typically, although this is somewhat changing across the nation, the timeline for physician scientist training is in my lifetime in the program. I started as an M1 and M2, which is a med student. You do your first 2 years. It's called preclinical training. We did summer rotations before starting. We take step 1, and then we finish that, go straight to the PhD. You have your candidacy and qualifying exam, which is basically writing a grant and getting it approved by your committee. And then you, at the end of your PhD, as Jose was mentioning, that he's about to do is defending your dissertation and then earning your PhD. Many of us will then go back to your M3 year, which is the clinical year, and then finish out with the M4 year, which is, of course, as I said, that's where I am now. And so there are some exceptions, as I mentioned. We just talked to someone at, I think it's in Tennessee, the big school there. I'm blanking on the name, but they also do this as well, which is they do their M1, M2, and M3 years, and then PhD, and then they finish out with their M4 year. But the vast majority do it in this fashion that you can see here. Let's see. So
I'll just add quick. Can I just add quickly?
Yeah.
Just before getting too distant from the applications, I did want to mention that the DO unfortunately has a totally separate system, which is super obnoxious. So, and you got to pay more money. So that is something to consider with the ACOMAS. So, and then we don't, unlike the MD PhD programs that have like a centralized application within the application service, DO PhD programs don't have that. And so usually during your secondary, when you're applying to those specific institutions, you can mark that you're interested for the dual degree program, and they'll then get in contact you with additional like secondary application things.
Good to know. I'll let Jude and Shane take over on this one.
Yeah, I mean, the first couple of years at least of medical school are definitely like, feel like you're drinking from a fire hose, that kind of expression. And it's very true. You get a lot of information from a lot of different courses, anatomy, physiology, pathology, like whatever you can imagine, I'll get thrown at you. It feels like at once, but you end up, catching up, you end up handling it. And some schools require some graduate courses that you have to take in the meantime while you're taking all these medical courses. So you do get some of the science with the medicine as well. So it's a good balance. And at the end of it, you take your step one, which is going to be pass fail learning.
Shane basically finished his this part, so he just took his step one a few months back, 2 or 3 months back, and is now transitioning into the lab. So yeah, you can, if you want to speak on it. Yeah.
That was my least favorite part.
Yeah, so I think we mentioned here 2 years of med school, but it's not really 2 years. It depends on the program you're in. Some programs are more fast tracked. At OSU, we have a more 18 months is your, more like 18 months or 16 months is your first first 1 and 2 years. So we have classes through the summer. So we end up going from August to the December of, and that's what we call the first 2 years, but it's really 1.6 years, such that you spend the first half of the following year just studying for this exam called STEP. You can either have, from 4 weeks, depending on the school, to 9 weeks to prep for it. And I'm learning even more recently that Pittsburgh has even more time. So they're like 3 months to study for this exam. So you have lots of time to do it. The good thing is, like Giancarlo mentioned, it's no longer, it used to be the rite of passage that you must pass this exam with some like stellar score to be able to do whatever you want to do. But now it's going to be pass fail, which takes a lot of burden off students, and especially people who are in an MD PhD program, given that we are in for the long haul already, right? We're committed to this process to be both physicians and researchers. And so, once you're done that, then you do here, I go straight into my PhD, which again gets you there much, much earlier, like 4 to 5 months earlier than you otherwise would. So we can get back to med school on time, et cetera. That's it.
So thanks, Shane. The initial PhD years, again, this is this transitioning to lab. It's often, at least when I did it, it was a highly desired point of training. You kind of get a little, you get used to med school and the whole, as Jude said, drinking through the fire hose, and it can be a lot. And so it feels good to kind of stop drinking from that fire hose and get back into something you also love, which is the lab. Grad school courses will begin. You'll form your dissertation committee. Also in that is again, this candidacy exam. Once you pass it, you're now considered a candidate. Technically, you'll attend conferences, you'll apply for NIH or outside, just private based grants, which there's nothing wrong with. And you'll submit abstracts and of course papers. In your fourth year, you'll wrap up your experiments. You'll have one final committee meeting, which is kind of like, are you okay to graduate? And then write your thesis and defend that dissertation, and then you've got your PhD. The M3 years is highly dreaded. So Tiffany, who's couldn't be here today, she's the vice president. She's transitioning into her M3 year. I believe in about a week, she'll start back to M3. Anyway, it's of course this dreaded return. You feel like you forgot everything. You're judged along with your students who just are fresh off step one. It's a new class. You don't know anybody. There are some programs that exist throughout the country, like programs, which are for leave of absence students, which are like boot camps to reacclimate students to clinical medicine. Being that I've gone through this all now, I will say that the worries are somewhat unfounded, just because unlike M1 and M2 year, where there's a lot of physiopath and pharm and anatomy, the M3 and M4 years are all about applied medicine, wherein there's a lot of diagnostics, treatment, and the language of medicine that you're learning. Not so much of that minutia of, P450 and what step that is in the electron transport chain, something that I can't remember anymore. Your M3 year is going to be full of clerkships. It's basically a full-time job. This was a picture of when I went, literally I graduated at OSU. Unfortunately, that you will get your PhD on Sunday and you will start M3 year the next day. So this was me literally taking the picture of my new white coat pager, and I guess they gave us a cookie. It didn't last all M3 year. Anyway, you're going to be caring for your own patients, helping with surgeries, delivering babies, sewing small wounds in the emergency room. You've got shelf exams as well. These are standardized exams that are at the end of each rotation. And then you'll start your M4 year, which is kind of the golden year that everyone can't wait to get to, because finally you can see that light at the end of the tunnel, in the beginning of which you'll complete your final rotations. You'll complete a sub-internship wherein you, for all intents and purposes, act like an intern resident. This just means you'll help order meds, call consultants. You can even perform certain procedures And at the end of M4 year, you typically will sit for your step 2 board exam. Very much clinical and again, less foundational knowledge exam. You'll apply for residency via this ERAS system. You'll have a, similar to when you apply to med school, a personal statement, letters of recommendations, extracurriculars, all listed. And then you'll complete, depending on your specialty that you're interested in, away rotations at rotations in other institutions, and you'll complete your interviews. And then in March, you'll have your match day, wherein you will be matched with your a rank list that you created. And it's 1 for 1, one trainee for one institution of where you'll be for your residency. And then this is what you'll do right after that. You'll have a few months of vacation. And then like me, I'll get my MD next Thursday. And then I'll have more vacation, and then I'll start I start June 17th. Most will start July 1st. But yeah, that's kind of the MD PhD, and as Jose talked about, the DO PhD in a nutshell. I did want to talk a little bit about AABPS. So as an aside here, so regardless of your career stage, Black MD PhDs have faced unique challenges with respect to not just MD PhDs, as we all know, but this is what we're talking about. So what I mean by that is a lack of resources, overt, covert racism. I always use this chain analogy, and this has nothing necessarily to do with slavery, but it historically was the starting point of why this chain analogy works. So just imagine one link in this chain represents one generation. As you move any chain, you move the links behind it. And in our sense, this Black race chain has been broken at multiple links. And these link breakages represent a loss of generational information, which is health, knowledge, wealth, etc. And so AABPS was formed last year to help make up for these lost links. We were formed, as I said, last year, in particular October. We're currently building a fund for scholarships and grants for our members. This will be hopefully for prospective and current trainees. We have 7 board members. We have to onboard the other 2 this week. We have over, Jude's count is like 70. This is an old slide now. We promote networking with current physician scientists, not just locally, but across the nation, and hopefully at some point here internationally. We are also promoting on our website access to funding opportunities. We have, as you saw, kind of snippets or a screenshot of informative faculty spotlight interviews. And then soon, and you're participating in this now, but this is an APSA seminar, but we also would like to have conferences either late this year or definitely starting next year. So stay tuned for that.
So we can skip this part because I would like to
Yeah.
get to the questions. So this is a little bit of a website overview, but you can just go to the website and check it out.
Yep. So you can definitely, if you're interested, which I would think you would be given the fact that you're here, you can follow us on social media and go to our website, as Jude said. Lastly,
Yeah, so just some additional information. I just threw my like regular question slide there. So I put in the physicianscientist.org, which is APSA. APSA is a bit of an older organization, the American Physician Scientists Association. It was founded in 2014 by trainees, and we're a trainee-led organization for people who are seeking out this career path as physician scientists, sort of broadly serving everyone. And we have currently approaching 2,000 members and over 100 different institutions. So lots of things that are going on at APSA. And I will mention that we, this past year, established a permanent standing committee called the Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Committee. And I saw that Jude put our flyer on there for the virtual summer research program, which I super appreciate. And so hopefully if you guys haven't heard about it, think about applying if you have some time this summer. What we're doing is we're connecting individuals with PIs and mentors directly to do a structured research program over the summer virtually. And we started this this last year due to COVID. We got a lot of people saying, you know, hey, I had this program like the one that Giancarlo mentioned before, but it's canceled because of COVID. And so actually an undergrad decided to start and sort of poke us to do something. And so we put this together. We match over 158 trainees with PIs and grad students across the country. And I think it was pretty successful. So hopefully that's another opportunity for people to participate in. And of course, join AABPS. It's important to have multiple different communities that you can participate in. So.
okay, so we will have questions time now, which is perfect, 21 minutes for any questions that you guys might have. I'll let Jude and Shane run this section.
Yeah, so we got a ton of questions in before the seminar started. So we're gonna start with those, and then we're gonna, if you guys have more questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. Probably gonna just direct the question at one person, maybe two people. You guys can touch on it. So first question we got was, how should non-traditional pre-meds that have a career and family go about preparing for applying to MD or DO PhD? So maybe Jose, do you want to talk on that, or?
Yeah, sure. So non-traditional meaning that not going straight from undergrad to the training path. I know just like typically there sort of has been this trend of taking longer to get to one of these programs, and folks are sort of really trying to combat that, saying like try to get your research in early, but there's also all these different opportunities to apply later. And so my first comment was just to say, what's happening is people are perceiving the career path is so competitive that they're trying to find a lot of these other opportunities. So first assess whether or not, you're ready to apply. Is what I'll first say. Don't think you need a billion things before you apply for that first time. The next thing is, if you're already a non-traditional student, there's great ways to enhance your resume or get connected. I think it's particularly important to highlight some of the things that you've been doing currently or are research related. And so if you're not currently either in a clinical or research environment, it might be important to seek out a recent exposure to that so that you can talk about how you're connecting into the physician scientist career path. And then in particular, DO programs are particularly friendly to non-traditional students. So if that's a consideration too.
All right, next question at Shane. Shane, the question is, what advice would you give to a student for making a school list, and how can they address some academic difficulties in their personal statement?
I
I
think
just say
Can you
we're
stop
seeing your
screen
email.
sharing?
So,
Yeah.
too, yeah.
Can you stop screen sharing? Thank you. All right. Yeah, the question was, Shane, how can the student make a good school list, and how can they address academic difficulties in their personal statement?
So I think one, school list is about where you are going to be happy, right? There's, I think about 90 the last time I checked, MD, PhD programs, or specifically MSTP programs in the country. Then there's tons of MD, PhD, just which doesn't fall in the MSTP umbrella. And then as we Jose mentioned, there's also DO PhD programs, right? So you have a wealth of programs. You want to be comfortable knowing that you're going to be at a place for 8 to 9 years, or 7 for some people who want to fast track. So you want to be comfortable in that space. You want to know the people are great, the community is great, the town is great. You don't want to go in the boonies if you're a person who likes to have fun and like do stuff. So those are really some big things to consider. I had already lived in like all the fast cities in the country, the entire East Coast. So I was like, why not go to some place that is more, calmer, but still have like the city vibe. And so that's why I chose the Ohio State College of Medicine. So that's a big thing. Now about like weaknesses in your essays. I think we all have weaknesses. Med schools already know you have weaknesses. They're already going to see most of those, right? They're not something that you can hide. So I think that for an essay, don't necessarily harp upon the weaknesses per se. Mention them, but use that as like a stepping stone into talking about something awesome about yourself. So if it is, you may have done poorly in undergrad and you didn't get the awesome GPA that you want that makes you competitive. But let's say you did a post-bac program. Afterwards, you did a post-bac program and you did well there. So talk about, what that meant for you, how that transition, you feel that prepares you to show medical schools that you have the capacity to succeed, right? You're already doing graduate school programs. So they know that. Now harp on that. So don't necessarily talk too much about the bad. They're going to see it already. You can't hide it.
All right. Jose, we got a question for you in the chat. So the question is, does a DO PhD program instead of only a DO increase your chance of matching into your desired program of residency?
Oof, that's a tough one. Definitely there's some positives in terms of the PhD because you have just additional time, years to be productive, you have additional degree, papers and research. But I would say that's definitely not a reason to pursue another additional 4 to 5 years of education. And so you want to be a physician scientist and be in a particular place that that's sort of the career path. Like if you want to be a dermatologist, or you want to be a neuroscientist or a neurosurgeon, and that's it. You want to be clinically focused, then seek out the 4-year degree and go for it. I'd say that the match rate for DOs is comparable to MDs, and with the merger, the APSA-AABPS, that's the residency, the sort of body of people or powers that be that administer the residency programs, those are merged. And so last year was the second year that DOs and MDs went into that same match. And so DOs are represented in every specialty. There are some barriers still to DOs, specifically with the coasts. It's mostly about regional diversity, and so the advice that I've been given is to do out rotations at particular places. It's not necessarily, there is maybe some DO bias, but it's really more about, like for example, on the East Coast, they're used to people applying from a particular set of schools or those individuals rotating in that area. And a lot of people end up staying in the state that they do their residency in. And a lot of people end up going to medical school at a state that they either live in or want to stay at. So that's not necessarily true, but in terms of like the majority of people, that ends up what happening. And specifically at a state school like Michigan State, almost 80% of the trainees from the DO school match in state, but that's intentional, right? So yeah, so I think that hopefully answered your question there.
Jude, I wanted to answer the question that Shiraz on Robinson posed earlier.
Yeah, I was gonna pose that too.
Class, it's SUCKS, right? You have right now my class. They're about to start on May 10th. They start 3rd year, and so I'm thinking, oh, I'm gonna be moping around in the lab while they're doing fun stuff, seeing patients and doing stuff, but. Like I said, so it does feel a little bit disconnect, but I feel like they're long time friends. You'll see them grow, etc. They'll watch you grow in your own respect as well. So it's a little bit bittersweet. But I'm excited to be in the lab and have fun as well. So, but it is bittersweet, just so you know.
Yeah. All right,
yeah, I'll just add to that. It gets better as more classes. I don't know if you but this is my second or third class that has like gone through, and like people, my little, so we did like a big SIB program at MSU, and my little just matched. And you would think that would be like bittersweet, but honestly, it was just awesome. And one of my friends, actually, I'm applying to do an out rotation at his hospital where he's a resident. So hopefully he'll be my attending for my ER rotation. So
It does. I agree. It gets better. Yeah.
All right. Giancarlo, I got a question for you. Question is, so what are some unique challenges that Black MD PhD students face, and what is the role that ABAPS can help in addressing some of these challenges?
So yeah, that's a really good question. So I can speak for myself in particular. So there were moments in time. So first of all MDs, DOs, MD PhDs, DO PhDs, whatever, they all will experience some form of, if you haven't heard it before, but it's called imposter syndrome. But I feel like those that are Black and brown in particular will, I feel like, have a greater sense of it for whatever reason. So one of the reasons could be that you feel like maybe you are here because of, they wanted to increase the diversity of their program rather than, and maybe that was what pushed you over the edge rather than your your scores or whatnot. And so for me, that was one thing in particular that really kind of gnawed at my being, especially as I was in first 2 years of med school and then beginning of graduate school. The main point with that is that, one, is that like your classes leaving without you and you're seeing classes go beyond, it does get better. How does it get better? It gets better because you've earned a PhD, or you start building your skills much higher and higher. So in other words, you're feeling more confident about your abilities as you age through the program. Two, ABAPS can provide definitely resources with mentoring, and similar to what Jose was mentioning, but kind of like we don't have an official one yet, but a kind of big sibling type program. And right now if that happens, it's going to be informal at the very moment, but I could envision having something more solid in the future. But that way you can speak to, in a sense, someone who is much higher than you in their training, and then help you get through it. Right now, I know that I've talked with especially Shane and Tiffany. Jude's newer in the program, but about certain, problems that we all have. It's not unique to them. And just because we went through it, we can pass that along. So, and it's power in numbers. So of course, that's what ABAPS is here for.
All right. So next question. So I got a question. Also, feel free to keep the questions coming. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. So I got a question from me that I can answer. So it's asking, how long is a program? So it's an 8-year MD PhD program. So you do the 2 years of med school, then 4 years of the PhD, and then 2 years back up to M3 and M4 year. So you don't have to do residency afterwards. The question is asking, do you have to do residency after? But most people traditionally do go into some sort of residency afterwards. Some people tend to can go do biotech work or go to industry, but the majority of people do residency afterwards. Lastly, the question is asking about if you still do research or you just want to be a physician afterwards. So you can choose one or the other. Ideally, the hope is that you end up choosing both and continuing down this path, because you did spend 8 years trying to get both degrees. So hopefully you can do. Next question is asking about, so Jose, they're asking about the DO PhD. So they heard that they're paid out of pocket. So does that mean that none of the DO PhDs are NIH funded and cover tuition? So what can you say on that?
Yeah, I was trying to type it out, but it's easier to just chat on it. None of the DO PhD programs have that T32 grant, and there's plenty of MD PhD there's lots. I think there's only 16 or 20 programs right now that have that MSTP funding. So what does that mean? That means that if you have MSTP funding, that like you're on a training grant, so nobody else at your institution has to worry about your funds. At MSU, we get a stipend, and our tuition is brought down to half of in-state tuition. So it's a pretty good deal. And a lot of the DO PhD programs will do the same thing, although it will depend on the institution. I know a couple of them only provide stipends during the graduate years, which is a huge bummer. And so, you just have to look and research and see whether or not where you get in and what's worthwhile. But yeah, MSU is probably the most traditional in its respect to funding of other programs. And there are MD PhD programs that require you to pay some tuition as well. So that is definitely something to be aware about and know, especially if you're applying to a smaller program. So.
And so just to clarify, there are more than 16, there are about 50 MSTP programs in the country.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a lot more than I thought. Okay, awesome.
The link in the thing that is to NIH website that pretty much has all the MSTP funding programs per state. So you can go ahead and look at those and start there. That's where I started. Albeit the fact that I was also at NIH when I was pursuing this. So I knew where to go and where to start making that list. So go check that out.
All right. Question at you, Giancarlo. Since you completed your PhD, so is there any disadvantages to doing a PhD before applying to the MD program over doing an MD PhD straight?
That's a good question. I think there are. Granted, I didn't do that, but I think there are, because MD PhD or DO PhD training as it is today tends to, for the most part, again, do this M1, M2, PhD, M3, M4 format, which is partly there for retention of the trainees. A lot of them don't want you to go through, and get your PhD whether it's first or last, and then, exit the program and say, I'm good. I have kind of what I need to start my career. I know one person in particular in our institution that got her PhD. We were in classes together, that got her PhD first, traditionally PhD grad school, and then entered med school. And I mean, I don't know, I haven't asked her personal opinion on that, but I will say that I'm pretty sure there's no funding for that. And you're not going to get on the T32, stipend, and you're going to have to pay for med school. I mean, I'm almost certain that that's, if I have to think about something being the biggest negative, it's that. So, $100,000+ loans to pay back.
Depends on where you go. It could be 300,000, but to that,
It's the expensive way to go for sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'll put in a little plug to answer you guys' question. So our very first interview that we did in ABAPS was with Dr. Karen Mitchell. We pinned some of the little snippets that we had from the interview on our Twitter, but the video, I believe, is full and free, available on our ABAPS website. You can see that. She did her PhD first at a college in, I want to say, Utah or somewhere
University of Utah.
University of Utah, and then she went ahead and did her MD at Stanford. So she did it before. She spent 5 years in the PhD, then she went and did the MD. She's still a stellar and amazing MD, PhD, and physician scientist doing amazing things. And I think if you follow her too, you kind of get a glimpse of, how long her journey was, how rewarding it is. So she talks about that all the time. So I can drop her Twitter handle here for you guys to see as well. But it all happens. And I think Dr. The other person who we had up here, which is Dr. I'm forgetting his name now. Dr. Black, he did it the opposite way. He got his MD first at I don't remember where, and then he decided to go up to Canada to go get his PhD. So, or Minnesota to get the PhD. So again, different avenues. They're all rewarding, and you end up in the same place, and they're great people. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to think about is, specifically at APSA, we do support, all types of different physician scientists, and you can get to the end career goal in different ways. And then, a lot of the older sort of folks just got the MD and then started their own labs. And so there's a lot of examples of, people with MDs who ended up getting Nobels and things for researching X, Y, or Z. And so it's probably a lot harder now because you don't have focused time to really do research. And that's what I love about the PhD, is like the only time in your busy life that you're going to be able to just like totally focus on developing yourself as a scientist. And so, but there are fellowship programs, there are year out programs during your medical training. And then, if you go into a subspecialty that is academic in nature, GI, ID, whatever, cardiology, you're going to have some specific research time. A lot of those programs focus on clinical research, like clinical trials or improving health outcomes. But there are also places where you could do a PhD during that time, or really focus in on like some basic science or something if you wanted to. So there are a lot of options. The MD PhD program is the most traditional and probably the best way to get focused time in research and get yourself some great mentors and move forward with your career as a physician scientist. So.
And then, yeah, it looks like we got one more question that was about, so the student was asking about MD PhD programs are mostly bioengineering, hard research, science research topics. Are there any programs for like social sciences or kind of psychology or community health? And is that also true in DO PhD? So I think I'm going to ask Jose first for the DO PhD side, and then I'm going to go to Shane for the MD PhD side.
Sure. I'm doing I horrible multitasker.
Give me a second. I can go to
So
change.
no, here you go. I was just posting here. We curate a list at APSA for social sciences and humanities programs, and specifically MD PhD programs. In terms of at DO PhD programs, you'll want to apply to MSU. None of the other programs support a non-traditional science. As I had said, like some of the programs are really small and they only have one PhD program, like for example, pharmacology or biomolecular sciences. So they'll have like a small group of faculty in that department that train PhD students as well as their dual degree students. At MSU, we're a massive Big Ten institution, so you can get your PhD at anything that's offered at MSU. So we've had people in anthropology and sociology, epidemiology, which is not a social science, but is sort of non-traditional in terms of focusing on population health. So we have not had, I don't know of any MD PsyD programs like psychology programs, and I don't know of any DO programs that do that either. The PsyD is typically a lot like clinically focused as well. So, but I know there are PhDs in psychology, which are typically more research focused. So.
Okay, so it seems like you answered both. So check out the website for information on kind of social sciences programs.
Yeah, the top
Go
big
ahead.
name schools already. Usually the top big name schools, they usually have every single thing you can do, everything you can think of, because they have the resources and money. They've been around a longer time. So if you start there and start trickling down from there, I'm sure you'll find other programs.
Some of them have like very specific tracks where they actually have mentored support that is like within their MD PhD program, which is really awesome. I know, for example, like Harvard has like the Physician Scholars Program. Well, they actually have a cohort of individuals who are training specifically in like medical ethics, psychology, etc. And so that might be really nice because you have structured support, mentorship, and a cohort of people who are doing the same thing. So we usually only take 1 or 2 people either in psychology or anthropology a year.
So I think we tried to get to, we got through most of the questions that we had. Sorry if we didn't get to your question, but please do email us. We are responsive to questions, and joining AAABPS. I'm going to turn it over to our president, Giancarlo, to close.
Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining this meeting, and of course thanks to Jose, Shane, and Jude for being here to help present this to you guys. Again, if I'm just echoing what the others have said, if you have questions, you can get at us on Twitter, or also we have emails as well. We can give you those through our Twitter. And also you can contact us through our respective websites as well, AABlackPS.org. And then Jose put the physician scientist APSA link, www.physicianscientist.org. And there are multiple contacts there. And again, I highly recommend joining both organizations. And just because the events and mentoring that you can get, I wish I had known. Well, of course, AABPS both didn't exist when I started. I started in 2013, so the MD PhD program. So I guess I wish both existed, but we didn't have it. So you guys are really lucky to have these 2 organizations. So yeah, let us know if you have questions, and we'll get back to you guys. So thanks. Enjoy. We have sun out here. That's why I'm outside. So I'm trying to enjoy we had a storm earlier today, but yeah, enjoy spring while it lasts.
Oh, and just one last plug. I don't, we didn't get to go through the website, so I don't know if Jude mentioned this, but when you become a member, you then will have access to the repository of other members that we have, so you can connect with other people at different levels. So whether you are a high schooler or, you know, undergrad, wherever you are, or post baccalaureate, you can always find someone through us that is on your level or higher to mentor you and like keep that chain link and not broken. So that's another reason to join and hang out with us.
And we also
Awesome.
post resources there too. So for different post-bacs or different summer programs, it's all on the site.
Yeah, and I'll say, you know, I don't know about APAPS, but there is a membership due associated with APSA. But if that is a barrier for you guys, obviously it helps sustain everything that we do. But if it's a barrier, info@physician scientist, that's our sort of like intake email. You just have to request it. You don't have to say anything. You just say, you know, can I get a membership waiver? That's it. And we approve all of those. You just have to let us know. And we're trying to change that to make it free for people who are coming into the pipeline. But just so you know, you can always request that if needed. So.
Also, just to clarify for trainees, what we mean is that you're at any level before you're either the doctor or the MD PhD. So at any point before the MD PhD, you're considered a trainee. So unless you're seeing patients on your own, you're a trainee. So it's free for you to join AAABPS. All right, just to clarify that.
All right.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to pay for it coming for
Yes.
everything coming up here. Well, my salary goes up, so you know it's fine. Give back. So yeah, someone asked really quickly, it was about Canadian students. I have no problem. Ours is American Association, so is APSA. So I would imagine, I don't want to speak for APSA, but for ABAPS, it's totally fun.
Yeah, totally. We have international members, so feel free to join. We actually even have some local chapters internationally. And then I don't think we have a website yet, but there's this, actually we do have a website. It's called ICSTO. And there's also a Canadian sort of cousin organization called CTAC. For Canada real quick. And then ICSTO is the International Consortium of Physician Scientist or Clinician Scientist Training Organizations. And so you can go on there, but basically we have a bunch of member organizations, people from China, Europe, Canada represented, and we go to those meetings as APSA. So yeah, those are two resources for you as well. There's CTAC is the Canadian version of APSA. So.
Can you provide Logan Dean the email for the waiver? He didn't get that.
Oh yeah, sure. It's info. I'll just write it in. I always spell physician scientist wrong, so just make sure.
And the person that asked about the recording will be up on our website. So feel free to check that probably later, either later today or tomorrow. Right. Any last words from I think we kept you guys long enough. So again, thank you for coming. Thank you for APSA for working with us on this. We really appreciate it and look forward to future collaborations together.
And guys,
Sure.
stay up on our social media.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you guys. See you.